we're living in times where the idea is that everything is a commodity and everything is for sale. And any interference in that is violative of democracy. I remember in the lead up to the WTO finalization, I had a debate in Washington with the Secretary of Commerce. And he said, democracy is the right of a consumer to buy what they want, when they want, where they want. And I had to say, and what about the right of citizens to work, have dignity, have meaning, have rootedness? Free market democracy has made the citizen disappear. And some citizens have been totally disenfranchised, and the others who haven't been disenfranchised have been locked into narrow consumerism. I am because I buy. I know you had Juliet Shaw, I noticed her name in the program, and she's done some of the best work on what consumerism is doing to the children of the United States, where from the day you're born and you can start seeing a television, it's through the child that the consumer market is being created. And when commodification of the world takes place, then water is commodified. An aspect of this commodification of water is privatization. Around the world, movements have grown saying, oh, water is not for sale, sorry. We stopped the privatization of Delhi's water supply. Italy has just had a referendum earlier this year where they voted against the privatization of water, even though the government had passed a law on privatization. It's the citizens who got together and said, we've got to question this law. My own work in Navdanya is based on resisting the privatization of the seed and the culture and knowledge embodied in it through patenting. A patent basically makes the seed private property. And in this case, what it does is says the seed can't reproduce itself, sorry. The seed needs to take Monsanto's permission to reproduce. And because the seed won't, therefore Monsanto needs to terminate the fertility of the seed. Patent laws are basically designed to treat seed saving and seed exchange as a crime. And that is why in Navdanya, our pledge is, saving seed is our duty. Exchanging seed as a commons is our duty. And we will not let any law interfere in this fundamental ethical, ecological duty to defend the seed as our commons. We've called this our Gandhian Satyagraha, our fight for truth, because the truth of the seed is the seed wants to multiply. It longs to reproduce. It wants to be distributed. It's the nature of the commodification and privatization of the seed to say, you will not be saved, you will not be distributed. The air, its very pollution is a privatization. Because after all, the atmosphere is common to us all. And some people putting too much contamination into the air have already stolen this commons. And then there's a second theft. Those polluters, instead of saying, sorry, we messed up the climate, we've turned your entire stability, climate stability, into climate chaos, and we're going to reduce our emissions, we're going to shift to renewable energy. They work out a brilliant scheme of emissions trading and carbon trading and say, we'll continue to pollute, we'll just buy up credits from those who haven't polluted yet. And we've seen the data. The Kyoto Protocol period was supposed to reduce carbon emissions by 5%. Emissions trading has actually led to an increase of 17%. So it's a failed instrument. But is it being treated like a failed instrument? No. In fact, the United Nations Framework Convention Treaty was dismantled in Copenhagen, and President Obama replaced it with a Copenhagen Accord between 5 countries. 180 countries sitting in there negotiating, and 5 of the biggest polluters got together and signed and said, now onwards we won't have any binding emissions. We won't have a legally binding treaty. President Evo Morales of Bolivia was so outraged he got up, and in his speech he said, this meeting was not supposed to be about the right of polluters. It was supposed to be about the rights of Mother Earth. And if you fail here, I'm going to organize a meeting on climate change and the rights of Mother Earth, which is what he did on Earth Day last year. And out of that very, very important meeting in Bolivia came the Universal Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth, a very, very powerful instrument that we are now using to show that unless we have reverence for the earth, humanity has no chance. Both because we depend on the earth, we are part of the earth, but because so many people's livelihoods are directly dependent on the earth. All the farmers and peasants and tribals and fisher folk of the world. But all of the future generations. If the earth's capacity to provide is destroyed, human rights are undermined. How will we have water if our wells and rivers are dry or polluted? And how will we have food if our soils are desertified? Our biodiversity of seeds has been pushed to extinction. Our farms are toxic. I was told there's an exhibition about reducing consumerism. And the artist has said, okay, we should become half. Now, the United Nations, you might remember 10 years ago, 11 years ago, put out the Millennium Development Goals. And the first Millennium Development Goal was we'll halve the hunger. We'll halve the hunger of the world by 2015. And for water it was we'll halve the thirst by 2015. But the instruments they depended on were exactly the instruments that have created the hunger and the thirst. Our work in ecological agriculture, in biodiverse organic farming has shown that we can double food production by protecting biodiversity. The United Nations Rapporteur on Food has released a report to the United Nations General Assembly showing that if we adopted ecological methods of farming, and his results are based on empirical studies in Africa, ecological systems of farming could double food production in 3 years on the planet. So here's the United Nations talking about 15 years and half the people having food to eat. And here's empirical data showing that we need to have no hunger at all on this planet because we have ecologically efficient systems. After all, food production is an ecological activity. Industrial agriculture might have imagined it's an industrial activity, but they couldn't industrialize the biological processes. What they've industrialized is the inputs to it. They've industrialized the chemicals, they've industrialized the seeds, and what is the industry that feeds into the entire process of these inputs? It's the war industry. The agrochemicals came out of war. Pesticides, fertilizers, even the herbicides, Agent Orange, was an instrument of war for Vietnam. Now, if you read the news carefully, we've just had, a month ago, bombings in Mumbai. They were made of fertilizer. The bombs were made of fertilizer. And the Oslo bombing was a fertilizer bomb. The fertilizers were returned to their original